The melodrama we know works, and it's a period kind of thing that fits in with the flavor of Beale. But we are not necessarily going to stay with the melodrama. I can envision doing a vaudeville show with jugglers and people that throw flaming swords and whatever, and ventriloquists, and having amateur nights, and then letting a person that wins perform for a month on the stage as a part of the vaudeville show. There are a lot of possibilities, and from an educational standpoint, once we have a cast in here, there's no reason that why we might not be able to come up with a show, a musical review, or something that's aimed towards the history of Beale and the history of Memphis. Because when you talk about entertainment, this city has got an awful lot of real exciting history.
Future plans for the Old Daisy Theater on Beale Street in Memphis. This is Lin Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with Howard Cobbs, owner of the Memphis Gaslight Dinner Theater, who is opening the new Good Times Dinner Theater at the Daisy, offering buffet dining plus old-fashioned vaudeville, which he hopes will accent both the flavor of Beale Street and the historical significance of the Old Daisy.
Of course, the Old Daisy Theater on Beale Street was built in I think in the 20s, and when I came in here and saw it, I fell in love with the building. And we were looking and talking about Beale Street and what Beale had and what it needed as in its growth period right now. I looked around and saw a real gap in an entertainment form that would be good for families, that would be good for bus tour people that were traveling from all over. On Beale, there's not really a nighttime entertainment form right now that I felt would draw a large percentage of them. And we looked at the old theater and we went, well, how perfect it would be to open up an old melodrama theater or a vaudeville house and let everybody boo the villain, cheer the hero, and just have, as the title of our theater that we came up with, have a good time at the Good Times Dinner Theater. So I talked with the people that were involved here on the street, and we decided to try it, and I'm real excited about it because I feel like the street itself has got such charm, and I think the things that are already being done here on the street, you're seeing it grow, and it's had its hard times, and it's had a lot of problem in getting off the ground. But I'm seeing and talking to the people around the Blue Suede Shoes that just opened up across the street with Carl Perkins and a number of the other places that are coming on the street now. I think this may be the year for Beale Street, and we're real excited that we may add just another dimension, because the whole secret to a place like Beale Street is having as wide an offering and as broad an offering to reach as many people as you can. And so that's why we feel that we've got a real chance.
You're starting with The Drunkard, and when is that going to begin?
Okay, it begins on April the 22nd, and it has an open-ended run. We're hoping to run our shows here 3 to 4 months. We're going to just have to look and see what the flow is and what kind of response we get and that type of thing.
Do you use a local cast?
As of right now, it looks like we may be able to draw all of our actors for the show from the Memphis area. We are a member, as is the Gaslight of the National Dinner Theater Association, and we just finished a National Dinner Theater Convention here in Memphis. I hosted it this year, and we had national auditions here with about 200 actors from all over the country. So I had a wealth of people that we could use, but again, my point with this theater, as with what I do at Gaslight, is to develop the talent that's here in the city, and we have got some marvelous performers. I really do believe that it's going to be another paying job for actors to keep them in the city instead of losing them to other places. It's another 7 actors every week that are going to be employed in their craft here in Memphis, and that to me is something I'm real proud of, because with the 2 theaters I'll be able to keep more actors maybe in Memphis and keep them from going somewhere else, because the old joke is everybody is a local somewhere, you know? So I'd rather find the real talented people from here who have a love of Memphis, who are familiar with Memphis, because I think, particularly working within the tourist area, we're probably going to do at this theater as we do at Gaslight. It's a tradition of dinner theater, is we'll make the cast available after the show to the audience so that they can meet with them and talk with them, and that becomes very important, particularly if we're going to be dealing with a lot of tourists. I think it's very important that those actors be from the Memphis area, because that's just another little way that we showcase our city.
The Drunkard is the first scheduled show, and who knows what will be next at the old but new Daisy Theater on Beale Street in Memphis, according to Howard Cobbs, developer and producer of the Good Times Dinner Theater at the Daisy. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Johnson & Higgins of Tennessee, insurance brokers, and employee benefit consultants. This is Lin Folk.
I painted still lives and animals and the traditional type things. And they wanted to know, can you paint a submarine? Can you paint men in action? It's not painting for someone's home or living room. It's painting for art's sake, for getting across what these people are really doing, what it's all about.
Christine Koczwara, the only woman selected by the U.S. Navy to visit Vietnam as a combat artist. A native of New Jersey, now she's lived in Tennessee for the past 14 years, where she's Associate Professor of Art and Art Education at Tennessee Tech in Cookeville. This is Lin Folk with Chris Koczwara. When we talked about the 3 months that she spent in Vietnam in 1970, recording her impressions. Much of her actual painting of the Vietnam scenes, the people, the military personnel, and the sentry dogs and other things, was done after she returned to the States.
Those had to be painted back here because of lack of space, drying time, materials, and so forth. But the recollections of all of these days there, I could put myself back into any given day and feel it, see it, the smells, the sights, the sounds are there as if you're there at that moment.
Did you do a lot of painting of the people themselves, or was it mainly the United States activities over there?
Both, because it showed the rounded out picture of the people as well as the military. And so often you would see the interaction of both, our men spending their extra time or off-duty hours with the children or helping them build toys out of found materials, just in general sharing time with the children.
Was there an exhibition of these works after you came back?
Yes, we had a show in Washington at Decatur House. It was at the Women's Press Club, where it was more or less of an unveiling and an acceptance by the military of the pieces I had done. That was an initial exhibition, and since that time they have a total of 44 murals in the collection. 44 large paintings, 6 by 7 foot, 6 by 8 foot. These are gifts to the government. As one of my students one time said, "Why did you do all of that? Why did you go?" I said, "Well, because that was what I could do best. It was my ability to paint and to do, and when the invitation came along, I just picked up my bags and went."
What other branches of the military have you worked with?
The Coast Guard program, the Navy program, of course the Marine Corps Combat Art program.
I saw something about a painting of the submarine, the Archerfish.
This was a commissioned piece by the Secretary of the Navy. His daughter, John Warner's daughter, was the sponsor of the submarine USS Archerfish, which is a new nuclear submarine. And it is traditional for the sponsor to give a gift to the ship and crew. And in this case, they wanted something rather unique. So the original Archerfish during World War II sank the Shenandoah, which was an aircraft carrier. It's the largest kill on record, and it occurred at night. There was no known record of anyone seeing this outside of Commander Enright, who fired the missile. I spoke with him, and he described the scene. He described everything, where the ship was hit, how the explosion looked, the type of evening, and from that and many conversations with him, I recreated that evening. You realize, you must think, by gosh, I cannot paint large for this one. It's got to fit down the hatch because it will hang on board the ship as a permanent gift, which has a plaque describing the story. And of course, when the ship is no longer in commission and out of the service, this all goes to the historical collection in Washington. It had to be done on a small area, and then it was framed and sealed in a special glass encased piece, and then the plaque was also engraved and placed on, so it's completely intact. And you have a viewing area of perhaps less than 3 feet, so it had to be very, very realistic. This was a challenge also, going from the extremely large to something much smaller without making it look actually photographic, but still capture the feeling and the mood of what had occurred.
Chris Koczwara, who now paints under the name Trella, was at Cape Kennedy when Apollo 7 was launched. Her painting of that resulted in a cover reproduction for a Navy publication, and the original of that hangs in the Pentagon. She's painted the Golden Eagle, which is the symbol of Tennessee Tech, and permanently installed in the lobby of the Bryan Fine Arts Building at Tech are 10 of her murals, each approximately 6 feet by 9 feet in size, a project which took her 4.5 years to complete. This program, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lin Folk.
Tennessee Celebrates has lots of music and sound and video, and it seems to create a sense of movement. It's designed to be an experience for people about the events, the festivals, the feasts, the games, the fun of Tennessee.
Tennessee Celebrates, a multimedia exhibition capturing all the diversity of Tennesseans having a good time. The show was first seen in Memphis, where it broke all attendance records. It's in Nashville at the Tennessee State Museum through June 2nd. Then it travels to Chattanooga, Knoxville, and Johnson City. This is Lin Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with Karin Bacon of New York, who produced the exhibition. She's been director and producer of lots of special events and public celebrations around the country. This one, Tennessee Celebrates, covers holidays, feasts, parades, and carnivals, competitions, history, ceremonies, and homecomings, all in one show that's bright, lively, and fun.
One of the reasons why we wanted to combine the video and the artifacts is we wanted to show not only the things that people use when they're celebrating, the costumes and the masks and the trophies, but we also wanted to show them within a context, how they're actually used. What do the people look like who wear those costumes? So they're just not isolated artifacts, they're part of a whole experience of celebrating.
I just looked at the show a little while ago, and there's something so vibrant. You walk in there, and it is a celebration itself. It's got so much life to it.
Well, we wanted it to be fun, basically. We are working with the First Tennessee Bank, who is a sponsor of the show, and they wanted to create an exhibition which would create a portrait for Tennesseans of themselves as they're playing and as they're celebrating. The project was inspired by Tennessee Homecoming '86, a real celebration of the state as a whole.
How did you know which celebrations to include?
We started with finding out what the tourist board said was the thing to do, and then through lots of phone calls and visits and just talking to people, we discovered other celebrations, and we discovered which ones would be the most relevant for our particular theme.
Did you go to all of these yourself?
I went to, I would say, 30 or 40 of them, and it was an incredibly wonderful experience for me, partly because celebration is my field, and I'm just fascinated to see the way various kinds of people celebrate, but also because they're such wonderful events, and people were so warm and so friendly and so full of humor and openness. The exhibit is divided into 7 different themes. Each shows a particular aspect of the way people celebrate, and each theme is designed to, in some way, symbolize or embody that aspect of celebration. So when we came to the theme of parades, we made the parade exhibit look as though it was really a parade float. It's about 40 feet long. It's covered with bright, shiny gold float sheeting, and it's got a king and a queen from the Cotton Great River Pageant Festival.
Well, then you have all the other things, like the various food-type festivals.
There are a lot of food festivals in Tennessee. There's Humboldt Strawberry Festival. There's the Ramp Festival in Cosby. Then there's the Fulton Banana Festival, where people make a 1-ton banana pudding and carry it through the streets, and everybody gets a bite. Oh, the Paris Fish Fry. They cook 8,000 pounds of catfish. Memphis Barbecue Cooking Contest is another one. We were looking at all of the artifacts from all of these festivals, and we saw a giant strawberry cone that came off of a float, and we saw a hand-carved banana from the Fulton Banana Festival. And we saw papier-mâché pig heads from the barbecue cooking contest and other items that were kind of oversized. So we said, well, why don't we make a great big plate full of all these beautiful pieces of food? So that's what we've done in the exhibit. It's kind of a big pop art plate of all the goodies from the food festivals of Tennessee.
How long did it take you to get all this together?
The actual work took about 2 years, because we first had to figure out what we were going to document and what we were going to do and organize it. And then we had to go out in the field, and it took from December to November of the next year to actually go and look at all the festivals and do the documentation and edit the video.
Karin Bacon, producer of the multimedia exhibition Tennessee Celebrates. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lin Folk.
I think people in various states in my region, Tennessee included, oftentimes feel fairly removed or isolated from what is happening in Washington, or in a larger way, what is happening in the whole arts scene, say in the Northeast or whatever. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think people in Washington are very interested in what's happening here, and I think they're very aware of a lot of dynamism, of a lot of excitement, of a lot of quality arts endeavors going on in Tennessee.
Much of the interest of the National Endowment for the Arts in Tennessee art is sustained by the work of the endowment's regional representative for the South, Hank Willett. This is Lin Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope when I talked with Hank Willett during one of his visits to Nashville recently. We discussed funding of the arts and what the future looks like in that area, but we also touched on the subject of progress in the arts in the South, which he's observed throughout the region. He lives in the South, in Alabama, and does a lot of traveling from there.
The region itself is the 11 states in the southeast, that is from Florida over to Louisiana, up through Kentucky and Virginia and West Virginia. And basically what I do is keep the endowment in Washington apprised of various needs and opportunities in the arts in the region. What that amounts to, I like to think of it amounting to this anyway, is that basically I'm here to make sure that the National Endowment for the Arts is serving the states, the communities in this region as effectively as it possibly can.
So you do a lot of traveling then?
Pretty much traveling. 11 states is a big region, and I can't say that I ever get bored.
Are your headquarters in Washington?
I am based in Montgomery, Alabama. I happen to be in Montgomery because I had worked with the State Council on the Arts in Alabama for 8 years before that, and I'm on the road so much, and it was as easy to stay in Montgomery as to move elsewhere.
Well, you go around to a lot of conferences, I'm sure. And
a lot of conferences, but then a lot of meeting with various arts organizations and individuals on a less formal basis too, which is what I probably enjoy the most because it's a chance to really sit down and get a sense of what people are doing.
what is the situation with the arts now? Have the arts become a lot more popular?
I think without a doubt. There's been tremendous growth in terms of the number of arts organizations. There's certainly been tremendous growth in the budgets of those organizations. I'm not saying that the arts are in a comfortable position now financially. I think it's a constant struggle with every dance company, every theater company, every individual artist. That goes on and on. I do think, though, that there's probably a much greater sensitivity with the general public. I think that the arts are probably less considered an extra and more considered an essential than was the case as recently as, say, 10 or 20 years ago.
What is the situation regarding funding for the arts?
Well, with the National Endowment for the Arts, I'm sure you have heard, as has everybody, a lot of talk about Graham-Rudman-Hollings. And right now that's having an immediate effect on our budget, the National Endowment for the Arts. For the rest of this year, we're looking at a 4.3% cut. Next year, although nothing is in final form right now, next year we're anticipating a 12.5% cut. Although there's probably some good news in this bad news. Certainly bad news to see less support of the arts. I think the good news is that no one in Washington is talking about eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts. No one is talking about the endowment suffering extraordinary cuts or 50% or anything like that. So generally, we are being treated in the same way that most federal agencies are. That is, under the various kinds of deficit reduction moves, once they target certain agencies for exemption, and once they target certain agencies for particularly large cuts, what is left over is kind of across the board, and that is the situation we're in right now. And
some of the money, then, from the National Endowment comes to the state of Tennessee.
Yes. Last year, about $1.3 million in endowment money came to various arts organizations in Tennessee. About a third of that money came directly to the Tennessee Arts Commission. The other two-thirds of that $1.3 million went to various arts organizations in all disciplines across the state.
A brief conversation with Hank Willett, regional representative for the southern states for the National Endowment for the Arts, when he was in Nashville for a meeting of Tennesseans for the Arts. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible by the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lin Folk.
You have to have flat kind of tap shoes. You cannot dance in heels or boots because the basic movement is the flat foot, and you're dancing close to the ground. Some general definitions for buck dances: you can't lift your foot higher than 6 inches. 6 inches off the floor.
Rhythm buck dancer Jackie Christian, performer, teacher, and author of books on dance history, particularly tap dancing and buck dancing. Earlier, in Alabama, Jackie received formal dance training, and when she came to Tennessee, she trained with Robert Spicer, a buck dance master who teaches in Dixon, Tennessee. She's seen in performances throughout the state, appearing along with such stars as Bill Monroe, Frazier Moss, Janie Fricke, and many others. This is Lin Folk with Jackie Christian as we talked about the beginnings of this form of dance.
It's a folk dance, and it came from the African traditions that came into America. It all came about because in Africa, the natives were dancing barefoot, flat-footed to the ground, without making sounds, and they used their body movements much more in their dance, interpretive in their dance. And then in Europe, they were wearing shoes, wooden or otherwise, and sound was the primary goal of their dance. They were doing steps, but they were producing sound, so they held their bodies very rigid. And so these two traditions came to America, one of a very rigid, quick-sounded dance and another of a very flat-footed motion dance. Of course, the African rhythms exist on such poly levels that their rhythm interpretation is different. A buck dancer is a person who dances in a certain way that came from the African traditions that came to America. Tap dance is an American dance form. It was created in America. It's based on primarily the rhythm and the movements of this buck dance.
Buck dancing is now enjoying a revival, thanks to Jackie Christian and others, and it involves a modern form of exercise as well, a concept that Jackie has copyrighted as old-time aerobics.
The body's going up and down, and the feet are going back and forth in opposition. And all the while you're doing this, you're making these sounds. So it becomes real physical. And it's a little bit harder than running because your body is moving in that sort of a runner's one foot and forward each time. But then that foot's got to come back, and while that foot's coming back, the other foot is working on the upbeat, producing other sounds. If you think about a ragtime piano, you have your right hand playing the treble and all these intricate sounds, and you have your left hand down on the bass producing this constant rhythm on the downbeat. So if you think about ragtime or playing the piano in conjunction with your feet, that's what's happening, because both feet are doing things at the same time, and one's sort of a treble and one's sort of a bass, because one's hitting that downbeat every time.
In addition to being good exercise, Jackie's classes and performances are keeping this authentic old-time dance form alive.
What I found in my teaching here in Nashville is most of the people that I'm teaching are older adults. I have people like 20 and 30, but most everyone is in their 40s and on into their 50s. And people come to me all the time and they'll say, oh, I remember my mother doing this, I remember my grandmother did this, and I just didn't learn when I was little. Or they'll come up and describe movements. They'll say, boy, my mom danced and she would just slap herself on the behind and all these things. Their steps. And I said, was it like this? And she, oh, yeah, well, that's what she was doing. It's very physical dance, and people who are in their 50s and maybe not have been active, they're coming back to these old ways and trying to pick up on something that they even didn't get when they were growing up. It's two ways of working with people. One of them is making contact with the children and introducing them to their heritage. And the other is providing some of the things that the adults now realize are very important to them and their heritage.
Buckdancer Jackie Christian. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lin Folk.
It's a quote that we took from one of the tapes of the elderly that we interviewed, and he said, "I have ridden in an ox cart and lived to see a man on the moon." This is the area that Sweetwater covers, from the ox cart to a man on the moon. Sweetwater was formed because of transportation. So what we've tried to do is bring every phase of transportation in. Some of them aren't as prominent as others, but they all play a big part.
Martha Peterman, project director for Transportation Come Alive, an exhibition of historic photographs and memorabilia in what used to be Sweetwater's South Central Bell Building. Now the building houses a museum with all its displays most professionally and artistically mounted, thanks to hardworking local volunteers with assistance from the Tennessee Committee for the Humanities. This is Lin Folk in Sweetwater, which is located at a midpoint between Chattanooga and Knoxville. For a long time it was a center for railroad activities, and most of the objects on display in the museum are related to trains, but some refer to general and even more basic forms of transportation.
We have a baby buggy, which is a very old buggy that came from the mansion at Tellico Plains, and it's in good shape, wicker buggy. And then we have an iron tricycle. It has iron wheels, everything about it, and this we consider the first form of a baby's transportation other than being rolled in a buggy. We do not take anything given to us. They're all loaned to us. And as far as I know, this is the beginning of a permanent museum for Sweetwater.
But you've done this now, really, in connection with Homecoming.
Yes. In fact, if it hadn't been for Homecoming 86, this would never have been carried out. And it's drawing people together. What we're doing mainly is getting elderly people interested and school children in their heritage. We want to preserve the past and get them aware of what their past was and how Sweetwater was formed, mainly preserving the past and drawing people into it, and their interest is enormous.
Now I see something else, and I'm wondering what it has to do with transportation. It looks like a typewriter.
Well,
Is it?
It was a typewriter which has all capital letters and was used at the telegraph office at the railroad station, the first one that was used here in Sweetwater. Although a typewriter, yes, it still plays a part for transportation because the telegraph office was at the railroad station, and we have pictures back there of the first telegraph operators.
So you do have a number of photographs here.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Do you have any paintings or drawings? I don't see any right here.
The only drawings we have are reproductions of the town's layout as it was first lined up when the land was given to Sweetwater to be settled. We hope to expand. We have another side to our building over here, and it will be extended to pictures and other things.
You said there was a spring here. Is that where the name Sweetwater came from?
It's an Indian name, and it's Swawita, something like similar to that, but the Indians named it, and the settlers then went into Sweetwater. The spring is a good spring. In fact, this is what the whole town is fed from. The water's received from the spring, but it was just sort of a gathering point, and they had cattle drives that went through here, and they brought cattle and shipped them, and the railroad started, and it was just more or less a main place for travel.
You were saying that a great many older people have been especially interested in all of this, and I'm sure that some of them have furnished you with things. Can you recall some of the comments that some of them made when they came here and saw all this for the first time?
Well, mainly, I had one just like that and I threw it away. Or, I remember this so well, just as though it was yesterday. And then one or two said, I wish we could go back to the old time.
Going back to the old times in Sweetwater, Tennessee, a town of about 5,000 population now, would be going back to 1852 when the town was founded as a stopping point for the railroad. Its railroad station was destroyed during the Civil War, but it was rebuilt, and 5 years later it was the busiest shipping point between Chattanooga and Knoxville. All of this depicted in Sweetwater's Transportation Come Alive exhibition, a special project for Homecoming 86, which Martha Peterman and others hope will become permanent. One object not in the museum is the railroad car named the Sweetwater, on display in a park in the center of town. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Choices Restaurant in Franklin. This is Lin Folk.
There is a style that we know as European, or Dresden, which is the style that was used in the old Meissen porcelain, and quite a few people paint in that style. There is Oriental, and the one that seems to be the most popular is the florals in the American style, roses and iris, and they seem to lend themselves to porcelain painting especially well, and they seem to be very popular. That's always what sells best.
When the Tennessee China Painters Organization met for its biennial conference in Nashville this year, there were demonstrations, lectures, lots of buying and selling, and all the various styles of China painting were on display. There are about 100 members in the state doing a variety of painting styles, and Barbara Walker of Ripley, Tennessee, prefers the Oriental style of painting. She's a past president of the association, a porcelain artist who teaches this fine art at Dyersburg State Community College. When I talked with her for Tennessee Kaleidoscope, I learned some of the history of this art.
It's a very old art form. Came to us out of China. It was always quite a highly kept secret because of the various techniques. It was very, very valuable in the 17th century and 18th century, sometimes priced equivalent to gold, and great services and pieces of decoration were ordered for the palaces of Europe. And we don't realize today what a privilege it is to have China, because it was only the very wealthy and the very royal people that had it at that time. It's only been in the hobby world since about the late 1800s. And when it was introduced into the hobby painter, of course the women just went crazy over it, you know. And quite a number of fine painters came out of Europe, especially to teach this. And around the turn of the century, it was just very, very fashionable. It suffered a decline. The arts always do when times are difficult, but especially because even our colors many times are imported. So we lost our source for a while. But it has regained its popularity, and I think it's really a coming art form right now.
There are a number of women here. Do men enjoy this also?
Yes, in teaching it, I have quite a few young men and older men as well. Although I think probably the numbers would be highly weighted towards women, but some of the very finest painters are men.
How long does it take to do one piece? Say just a dinner plate. How long would that take?
There's so much difference in the amount of decoration or the amount of painting that's done on it. But I would say on the average, in my classes, we paint about 9 hours or 10 on one piece, usually in 3-hour segments. And it usually takes at least 3 paintings with firing in between to achieve the depth of color, because our colors are translucent. And so to achieve depth, it's rather like watercolor. You have to paint the darks in as you go. You start with the lights and work to the darks. Some people do get it in one firing, people who are very skilled.
Do you know anybody who's come to a show and seen all of this and then decided to become a China painter?
The first thing I always hear people say is, well, I can't draw a straight line, so I couldn't do this. They somehow assume that you don't expect to sit down to the piano and compose a piece immediately, but you do seem to expect to sit down and paint or draw immediately. So it's a learned process, and we try to encourage people to at least try it. But it's been my experience that most people love it. It's very challenging. Personally, and I've tried, all mediums, and I find it the most difficult.
Now, why?
Well, several reasons. One is that the designing has to be especially good, because you're working largely with either round, such as a plate, surfaces, or with three-dimensional objects such as vases and pitchers and urns and that sort of thing. The colors change slightly in the kiln, so you have to have a good knowledge of the colors and what they will do, and you have to anticipate what they will do. And of course, there's always the magic of the kiln, something is always going to change that you don't expect. So I just feel that it's a little bit more challenging, but it's very rewarding.
Barbara Walker, who teaches the art of China painting at Dyersburg State Community College. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Choices Restaurant in Franklin. This is Lin Folk.